Cool.
Let's see. So project milestones outlined. This is done as far as I'm concerned. The numbers probably need a double check, but the next step is just to go connect with Eden and figure out a time with his people to review it. And that would be the last thing that would change any of these numbers. But
cool. And I'm wondering if they're even going to be commenting so much on the numbers or more on like the presentation style and how it's broken down and laid out. Kind of that seemed to be, or I mean, I'm not sure, but I have a feeling they might have lots of comments on how those things are presented as much as how much it's expecting to.
definitely. Yeah, the only reason I leave that piece in there is that, like, in case they're like, oh, but don't forget that you're gonna have to do this, and that's not budgeted for.
Right.
You know, that's what I leave in. But honestly, I feel like we have enough buffer if we had to, and if and I feel confident that we could freeze the numbers.
So our final deliverable on that is basically running it by Eden and team. I think he said he was on vacation for 2 weeks. Are we cool taking it up with his team alone, or do we want to wait until Eden has his eyes on it as well?
I mean, Z maybe could have some input on it, but I would just go with his team.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think he'll actually look at it. If I had to guess, if it goes out and I suspect that if it goes out to his team, he may almost have an easier time looking at it while he's not otherwise encumbered. It's not a guarantee, but like I would send it, and then like the worst thing that can happen is he says, "Hey guys, hold up until I get a chance to look at it." Cool. Right?
Yeah, fair enough. So should we schedule something with them, Griff? Do you want me to try to find a calendar slot that works for all of us later this week or early next week? Do we have a timeline for that?
Yeah, that would be magical. Later this week would be preferred. But I'm open to anything. And the ideal is that it's like, West Coast friendly times. So, in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Griff, are you back in the U.S. time zone?
Yeah. I have another week here on the West Coast.
Cool.
And then I'll be on the East Coast for almost a week. And then I'll be in New York. And then I will be running off to Barcelona.
With all of us?
Yeah.
Or some of us, both of us.
On that topic, which well, I guess I don't want to skip the analytics dashboard deep dive. Is that
so Z and I chatted about it briefly, and we thought that would probably be best to do in Barcelona
during
just with schedules and whatnot between in the pre-week.
In the week where I'm there and you're there, right? Because it'll be just so much higher bandwidth if we're just together.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we'll find a time in there. I'll put it on my list.
We might even try to record it, because the truth is that I find myself having to explain a lot of this stuff a lot. And even if we don't end up using it as a bulk talk, the reality is that sort of best practices in the sort of business analytics, data science, like basically just there's an entire field of expertise that is like kind of captured in a handful of bullets on our thing. And I think it's actually very lacking in the cryptodom. It's like there's some people with like modest amounts of expertise, but like in terms of the just cross the board best practices, normally you have to work in the industry for a while, sort of learn what works and doesn't work in practice. And all that knowledge is something that we want to make sure that is leveraged in the Common Stack project as we get to those later iterations. But I think, we're going to have to we're going to want to figure out together sort of how to sort of impart that knowledge and say, hey, we're doing these things without also having to essentially, you can read months of blogs about how to do data science right. Like if you were to go into that venue, and it's even evolving in time. You've got expert sort of learning how to improve processes. And we want to make sure really that this boils down to there are best practices, there's experience, and we're going to make sure that what's done with the common stack is up to those standards. And since it's so far in the future, I would argue that our commitment is actually to the best practices as of when we get to that, which is part of the reason why it's written that way, as best practices.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can, of course, start it early. Like the whole way this is set up is that if we raise $5 million, by the end of this year, we could start the analytics dashboard early. But that's definitely one that we.
But just to be clear, like we can, and in fact, the thing itself will evolve with time, because going back to our initial discussion about those web apps, you realize that like they serve a double purpose. They serve it in the advance of a system. They're fundamentally just they're toys to play with. But in a live system, there's they're like processes for synthesizing them with data to turn them into the back ends of these analytics dashboards. Like that's how that actually works. So the work that we're doing, that we were even just discussing, doesn't exist just to make toy demos. It exists because the core code base for the apps is also the core code base for the systemic part of the analytics, because you take the data feeds and you synthesize them with the CAD models to produce like trained models that help you make projections and make decisions. It's a long arc, but like that work is like I always say, like we're just constantly building up blocks and methodologies and tools to make these things easier and better, rather than sort of just like waiting and saying, hey, we're going to figure it out when we get there.
Yeah, I'm excited about this, but I think this, like you said, it's kind of deep in the thing. I'm glad I think it's fine that it's delayed until we get to Barcelona. The real big piece is that we talked to Eden and team, and looks like Jeff already has an action item there.
And Eden and his team are actually, I mean, they've been hands-on, and I've been working with them on other things. So like the analytics stuff, they're, what I was just saying, I think they're pretty well aware of. So they're unlikely to be like, hey, what does this even mean? And if they are, then, you can always route them back to me, and I'll say, oh yeah, hey, remember these things that we've talked about with project A or B? And they'll probably be like, oh, okay, we get it.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything else on Project Milestones?
Nope, I think that's it.
Lorelei, have you been able to check the numbers?
Oh, no, I didn't do that.
Okay, it's okay. I will put that in there.
But are we moving into the on-site discussion?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So yeah, a little connection to lead in there. I did make a document for like throwing our ideas for possible agenda items for that week. Nothing is going to be binding, because we will, like, a lot will change in the next couple of weeks, and we will ultimately build the agenda when we're at that point together. But there's some ideas coming up here that maybe we don't want to forget for later. So I added in the link there to that document, and I put it in the strong team file of our Google Drive, which I'm not sure what that file is for, but I've been co-opting it for the for the onsite.
I think Max is okay with that.
Cool. Strong team.
Yeah.
So we have discussed a stipend and like a stipend and travel cover situation that we were originally just thinking of for people who for sure like wouldn't be on contracts, like compensation contracts. At that time, we were just thinking, oh, like Z, Parker, Adam, if we can get them out. But now, Griff, we've been talking about like, since this raise is being launched a little later, maybe not start in with the timing of vacations in the summer, maybe not starting like full on build force until September, in which case I think it would be more people than we originally were thinking might need that stipend. Is there, I mean, Coach B said it was easy to do, like legally he consulted about it, but I don't know. Do you have anything to say?
Who are
Yeah,
we
I mean-
thinking about that?
Well, like basically anyone who won't have any pay for going down there. So like Max probably won't be on contract. Spunnet probably won't be on contract, and other people. We probably just, things are happening slower than we want them to happen. So confronting that reality is that like people won't be paid, won't be on salary or anything to get there, and if they would like compensation, we would like to offer it. You know. So, but
Yeah, just so you know, for me, it doesn't have to be as well. I mean, I can just travel there. I don't expect compensation for my time over there. Just so you know.
yeah, no, and I think that's how a lot of people will be. But I think that we can offer it. And what I'll do is, while we're on this kind of thing, just talking about this in general, I put up a Common Stack pre-launch campaign for expenses, and just so I can do accounting for fronting them with the expectations that I will get some reimbursement for this eventually one day if the Common Stack raises money. So that's all fine. If you guys have expenses, we'll just do the general give accounting until we can get money in our multi-sig that we can spend. So.
Okay, cool. As long as no one has reactions to that, I guess the only other thing that I really wanted to say about the onsite is please go and fill out that sheet that I sent to you all in the core org channel. I will link it again. It's just logistics for the onsite. So like, what time will you be arriving and leaving? Can we group you, on taxis from the airport with somebody else? And
I found it.
And what are your like food needs? And so yeah, even if you guys don't have your plane tickets yet, it would be great to fill out some things on there. I would really appreciate it. It helps me make sure you guys are all well taken care of and that we can like budget things, plan accordingly. And I just put that in the sidebar chat on Jitsi as well. Let me see if there's anything else on the onsite. Yeah, just to announce, lots of people sounds like will be hanging out early at the Giveth office and hacking, Jeff, Z, Griff, and I. So anyone else who has, well, that's most of us in this room. But yeah, come.
Chris mentioned he probably wouldn't make the on-site. I spoke with him earlier today, and he said he wasn't sure that that it would be the most effective use of his time and skills.
Who is that?
That Chris.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
Just in case you don't see his name coming in and are wondering where he's at, he's not thinking he will join at the moment.
Usually he's an early one, early detail filler. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I was wondering. Okay, that's all for me.
Cool. Anything else on the July onsite? Moving on. Narrative launch.
All from my end. Yes, so Chris and I have a meeting for Thursday. Basically, I've been doing a lot of sketching. Those sketches that I showed you on paper last call, I put into just on a screen because Griff said he really liked them. So they're all in the docs now. So the docs are really getting fleshed out with some diagrams. Lorelai and I have a few chats about some final iteration diagrams. And then hopefully this meeting with Chris that I have on Thursday, we'll do a final polish and we can have these, at least first version ready to go. We can send them out to advisors, and I want to send them to Eden as well to include in that document overview, and make any final tweaks. And then those are ready to go out to initial donors as soon as we're ready to start pushing that. And I know there's lots of people that have been curious about what we're up to, so I feel like this is a pretty good overview, wrap up summary of everything that Common Stack is about, and continue pushing that all our narrative forward. So Name-a-thon glossary, I think from last week, we asked people to jump in and cross out terms they didn't like, bold terms they do like. I think this is also going to be a bit of an organic process. As Chris and I go through and polish, these names are all used interchangeably through all of the documents. So I think that'll be really kind of the point that the glossary gets finalized and all taken care of. So the glossary doc right now seems to be quite the hodgepodge. What do they call it?
Shit show?
No, what is it? The Frankenstein's wife or something? No. Morbid.
Oh.
I don't know. It's something.
Yeah.
We always forget the term. I don't know.
Whatever. That like Frida Kahlo would draw. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
You know what it is, Lorelai. We talked about this. You have a different name for it, and you would draw them.
Oh, that game where you do like the 3 different like body sections thing?
Yeah.
Corpse.
Yeah,
it's a corpse.
Yeah. Something corpse. Anyway. That's where our glossary doc is. But it'll come together. It'll come together as we do this polishing. Great. So infographics from Amy. Oh, okay. I have a couple notes down below, but I will copy them above. So Lorelai, I'll give you some feedback just in these notes. Maybe we can have a quick 5 or 10 minute chat if we need to clarify any of those, and we can pass that on to Amy. And Jeff, then I guess that wraps. Yeah.
I was really hoping that you would talk to Amy, because it's been too difficult for her to like understand what you want just from your papers, and like things that, like, it didn't really work, right? We had kind of some communication breakdown with me trying to middleman the product, like designing like feedback there. And like, of course, yeah, I can handle like, technicalities, the business like side of things, what's our relationship and like pay with her and deadlines and stuff. But I don't know. I think unless you really like the diagram she has now as is, I feel like you need to actually speak with her.
So I think there's a few simple points. I mean, I'm not. I managed to tweak my my diagram and got it into the article, and the article is like sitting for publication. I think Chris was hoping to get it out today or tomorrow. I mean, we can swap in the new diagram if we have it, but it's not something I want to sink a ton of time into. If it's going to be, an additional hassle for Amy to make changes. I made 3 or 4 comments just below in section 5, actually, which I will copy up above. So, I mean, if we think she's willing to make 2 or 3 more changes to that under our current arrangement, I'm down for that. If that is going to be an additional budget, then I'm cool to say, we're good with the diagram as we have it.
It shouldn't be an additional budget. No, she's been waiting for the first line of feedback. Like there hasn't even been one feedback round for her on this diagram.
Okay. Yeah, I can jump on a quick call with her. There are just 2 or 3 things that I was hoping that we could get into that diagram to bring it up to snuff, and then we will still need to figure out an iteration 5 and iteration 6 diagrams for. I mean, if we find that useful. I don't know if anyone has gone through the system overview or the like Common Stack system overview doc, where the iteration strategy where we talk about each iteration. I thought a graphic would be helpful to allow people to kind of quickly visualize what is coming out in each iteration. And if people think that's useful, then perhaps it's worth the additional investment for a 5th iteration and a 6th iteration. Max is also available.
Do you have a timeline on when you would want the 5th and 6th iterations?
I mean, as soon as possible. Basically that's one of the last things that's sitting, other than this final document polish, for these narrative documents. It's only the graphics that are outstanding.
So does it bar the
I
use
also-
case for the original 4 puzzle diagrams?
Nope, those are already in there.
Okay, so like that thing would be published before the 5th and 6th needed to be done.
They're all in the same doc actually, and it's not really published. We're just going to be handing it around to people. So I mean, if that goes out to our advisors and we say, look, this is still a work in progress and the last 2 diagrams are coming, I don't think that's the end of the world. This isn't being published on Medium or anything.
Mm-hmm.
I've also reached out to JP. Zargam, you sent me a diagram not too long ago, just showing the interconnections between Jupyter Hub and Docker and GitHub. And I thought that did a really good visual explanation of how all these systems fit together. So I reached out to JP and just said, hey, what are the chances you would have a visual designer that could help kind of lay out some of our system processes? And he said, let me know where you're at. And so I'm going to schedule a call with him either later this week or next week and see
really
if any of his resources.
Robert. He's the one. So
Yeah.
Robert drew some really awesome stuff, including like my Twitter backdrop is a thing that he drew from my talk at The Hague. Yeah, and he was at Odyssey doing some drawings. He also drew the thing with the Dandelion and LB with the dancing and the fish thing. That's the guy you want.
Yeah.
If there's any way. I'm
Cool.
sure that he's expensive. There's also the possibility that as we progress on Common Stack, actually, I think Common Stack is very deeply aligned with the Nature 2.0 like storyline because the systems are sustainable rather than profit extracting. I know he doesn't love the language, the economics language, and so it'll always take effort to sort of finagle with him, but he is pretty well resourced and we're doing things that meet his narrative. Like foundationally what we're doing is creating infrastructure for essentially nonprofit entities. They can function, and that's what he wants. He just is weird about the words he uses for it sometimes because he's very picky about what those narratives evoke in terms of nature versus economics. But anyway, point is, I think he's actually a potentially great resource. Sure. As our stuff gets more mature, finding ways to tap the Nature 2.0 community to advance.
And I don't know how you guys feel. Like, I think we should keep working with Amy, but dude, I'm loving Jeff's drawings, and I don't know if you guys feel like it's not professional enough or what, but I don't know. I'm kind of okay with just letting Jeff do all the drawings. He has to do them anyway. And then, I mean, does anyone object to that in these like? I think a good example is in the Common Stack summary. He has one that hasn't, like there's the build phase one, the hatch phase. And I mean, obviously they could have a little work, but like just to make sure that they make sense. But I don't know, does this style, does that work with you guys, or do you think we should go with I'm totally cool with going with a graphic designer, but the whole iteration feedback round, we're not the best at it right now. So
yeah. So I mean, I'm happy to use these as sort of like
that for sure.
I honestly think that at the phase that the phase we're at, I think Jeff's diagrams are great. It's kind of the same thing with the Lucidchart diagrams that I've made with Abby. Like, the reality is that at the stage we're in, like, what we can make is great. And then I generally take a dumbbell principle where it's like, it's two extremes, right? There's like when you're needing to do things that are designed, then I would prefer to go like further in the direction of like sort of professional packaged and like fancy, not fancy, but like, you know, on brand, whatever. But like, I wouldn't do that lightly. So it's like, do it ourselves. And then when it's time to say, hey, this is a thing where we're very set, or we're going to reuse it a lot, or like you meet some certain threshold that there's a switch rather than having a continuum. It's sort of homegrown insofar as we can do it. And then like a stark shift to something that's like very put together, but only for the things that we matured to the point where we know that we want to do. And then it's worth doing the iterations that, like, you kind of get the idea.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking.
I think there's something like charming and like trustworthy about like the vibe of like, yeah, like an engineer or mathematician's like sketches and diagrams. I think it would speak to people in a way. I do think there's a point at which we have to like level up into the more professional images. But one thing is I would still highly encourage there to be like feedback processes about this, because like, like with, for instance, with like the buckets as the 6 iterations diagram, like we kind of realized that actually the whole like overflowing thing gave people the wrong idea and stuff. So like, it's not that it would be necessarily like saving a whole bunch of time to like, I think it would still need some like feedback rounds and just some checking. If Jeff is going to be our illustrator, our in-house illustrator. And
For
I
sure.
just worry for that, like that it's also, Jeff, you have a lot on your plate and like, you're busy. And so
I'm
like,
looking for that idea bouncer. Yeah. Like I think these are good rough, but I think there are lots of, alternative ways to convey these things, or clearer ways, or, this can be cut, that can be added. I think there could be a few more rounds of iteration on these in rough before, as we're talking about, giving Amy an incomplete spec because there needs to be more iterations on them. Perhaps that's where we need to focus more of our time, is iterating on those diagrams before we, put them out to graphic design looking for,
yeah, that
I'm
was
happy.
kind
I'm
of
happy
like
to.
a let's run at it thing. Also, like, just simple things like having way clearer handwriting. I mean, I'm sure that a fair amount of our audience is going to be not like English first language people, and it gets hard to see like. Yeah, it gets hard to see stuff like. Are you drawing them on paper, or how are you doing it?
I'm just drawing them on my screen with a stylus. So what I just realized that now I can type. I can't in the actual art thing. I mean, if I'm going to be doing that, maybe it's worth me finding a tool that's more than just the Windows Sketch, and I just save it, and then I can add text later. So I mean, if that's the plan for the near term, maybe I'll look into a tool that will allow me to do that more smoothly, or even integrate Lucidchart. I mean, there are lots of functionalities in there that are super useful. So I'll take a look into that.
I love this style. Like, just don't go too far from the style, because it really.
All right, cool. If we're happy with
also,
this as a first iteration, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I think for like iterating on, I think this is great. I also think it's readable and all that. So I also think that if we have like these good iterated on sketches, that is a perfect input for a sort of a more professional graphical designer to really create something better out of it. Because then I think the sort of the iteration on the narrative part is already done. Then it's really like, okay, this is the thing we want to convey. We already showed it to some people. Maybe we did some internal iterations without putting too much effort into it. And now this is sort of the final thing that seems to resonate with everybody. And then we can just have a professional drawing out of it. I think it will save us time in the end.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
I'm game with that.
Cool. That was great.
Cool.
So let's see, we're at graphic designs. So then will we continue with the faucet? I think we need to finish with Amy. We made a deal with Amy, and we're gonna finish the deal with Amy.
Yeah.
So,
So
we're going
I will.
So whatever you can get out of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna copy and paste my notes here, and maybe Lorelei, or I'll post in the Telegram group. And if you want to be part of that call too, cool. If not, I can just chat with Amy about it.
Okay.
Cool. So next point is graphic design. So I'll set up a meeting with JP. Max basically said he is on the sidelines, ready to do stuff whenever we are ready. They're definitely coming at it from like the whole brand perspective. So I think they could be really helpful once we have these things fleshed out a bit. They might be a bit more expensive if they're in on the process of iteration. But as we say, if we're sticking with these kind of rough sketches until we iterate them to a point that we're happy, then we have a much clearer vision of what we're passing on. So we can just keep them.
I will give Max the credit for Max Kudinoff the credit for the fact that he does a pretty good job managing that process. So if you are in a scenario where like your like some of the value add is the actual helping you sort of stay on process.
Right.
If you obviously it depends a lot. Like so, we do some projects where I have my team members sort of like managing the project and they're just resources, and we have other things that we delegate more wholly to them. But I will say that like Max is pretty invested in good design process. So in places where following good process is also a bottleneck, part of the reason the expenses go up are the ones where they are like taking some of that onus. So there's room for you guys to sort of work out with them what they're doing. I certainly have done things I've thrown over the fence and gotten like 2 hours of work from them and had an awesome like my slides for my talk at The Hague were done by them, and they did them over a weekend, and they just basically did awesome work taking slides that I had made and making them beautiful. And that wasn't like a long-term project. It was just X hours to transform images that I had previously created. So they kind of do both. You just have to basically figure out what it is you need, and if you end up working with them.
Cool. Sounds good. We'll keep that in mind as a resource that we could potentially make use of when we have the budget and the approval to move forward with that kind of work.
That makes sense.
Cool. Awesome. Next point on the agenda: delays.
Yeah. So we're clearly going a lot slower than we had hoped, especially when we were like, okay, let's get this started in May, right? And for me personally, I'm running into major Burning Man requirements. And so I'm not going to be able to be the driving force here. Jeff has already kind of taken up that flag and has been the driving force. Jeff, Lorelei, and Ben. And it's basically going to have to continue that way for the next 2 months for me. And so I feel like we need to have some sort of strategy around this or plan. I'm glad, like one of the reasons we were pushing so fast and was to get Block Science funding so that they didn't have to lay off people. But it sounds like you have funding right now, right, C?
Yes and no. I mean, right now what's happening is I'm covering my costs, but I'm also now I'm in that really the opposite weird position where I'm figuring out what I can take on. And I mean, I operate a very month-to-month business because of the nature of doing the R&D and doing public research, essentially the sort of contract R&D matched. And we do have we had a burst of projects and we're working on them. So I've been kind of grinding hard with my team. I'm not at risk of laying anybody off, but I'm at let's just say that now it's a question of what resources I can allocate to things. So I would have to hire people in order to be productive because now all my people are mapped, and actually a little bit overcommitted in a couple places. So I'm it's a balancing act for me always. And so it's the other side of the pendulum, which is also not great. But I mean, my feeling on CAD as a sort of modeling framework, we just had a master's thesis get published using the methodology. We've got like, things moving that I think are really good from getting CAD open source perspective. We've got the TEGG. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's like, oh, okay, cool, it's totally fine to delay. But I'm also going to say I would worry about launching arrays and then suddenly having people that they would expect to be available to talk to be less available yourself. So, I mean, I would say that, no, I'm not at risk of laying people off at the moment because I have a full set of projects, but I also have other problems that would be greatly diminished by being able to just get CAD out there and not have to worry about what we're doing now with this sort of like, hey, I'm trying to give it away for free to anyone who's really doing good work, at the same time that I'm reserving the rights so that we can open source it as part of this. That's essentially overhead. Like literally, it's just overhead. The moment that we clear the hurdle and we open source it, I can cut overhead. So like I'm not in a hurry to be like, oh yeah, it's fine, let's just wait. But I also am not going to be like, demanding at the level of, if there are constraints, there are constraints.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys can take up the flag and nail the fundraising this next 2 months without me, I mean, that would be amazing. But man, I feel like we're gonna need to really go. When you start the fundraising thing, well, okay, there are a couple of things. Setting the dates, because I do want to give people a date that they can, if we don't raise $1 million, then they get their money back. And so setting that date, I was hoping to set it for like July 15th, July 30th, but now that's clearly not possible. So I'm more looking at setting it at like September 30th.
So what if we do something like this? What if we propose a soft launch where we're not actively going out fundraising, but it's sort of like the fundraise is open with a
no, totally starting the fundraising.
Yeah.
But
just let me play this out. So with the people who are getting involved during that period, the soft launch knows that the official fundraising hard launch is, say, some date in September. So like a date that we pick that's after your commitments are resolved. So I'm not.
I would even say that we can launch I would say we should launch the full fundraise before the Token Engineering Global Gathering, if not, or at.
So maybe we even say at. Okay, so like just tentatively. Okay, so suppose it's at. Then we set the sort of, you need a FOMO deadline, which is going to be some period after that. So maybe it's the end of September, as you're saying. So I mean, like, what I'm trying to do is like create a program plan for fundraising that respects the real constraints. So we have a soft launch date very soon, where we have these documents that we're just finalizing, and they exist, and we can circulate them they can spread organically, and the documents themselves include the fact that the formal announcement of this isn't going to happen until, say, TEGG, right? Mm-hmm. And so we have this, soft period where we can sort of seed the territory, people become aware, there's some anticipation, right?
Yeah.
And then we have the official launch, so essentially it's soft launch soon, official launch date, must have by date. And so if we set that plan out there, then, we can work within those frameworks. And so during block 1, we're doing a lot of what I would call, like starting to have conversations, share the docs, but it's lightweight. It's not like a thing that's going to blow you up, but it's still going to probably involve periodically having a call here and there, but not like a sort of mega overkill. We do the official launch, we have this period, and then, I guess I'm sort of repeating myself now, but it feels like we can put together a plan that is like aligned with what you're saying without it necessarily having to be treated like a big delay. It's more that we like plan the thing in stages, which is the sort of soft launch percolation sort of networking phase, followed by the official announcement, public announcement, followed by the must-have by date.
Yeah, and it gives us a lot of time to work on
That
some
end of
things. Like,
September does allow.
yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say that gives 4 to 5 week fundraising window for, this is also, I think Token Engineering Global Gathering is fantastic place to launch that, because that would be the audience of anybody that would be eligible for that announcement as well. So if that gives them 4 weeks to collect that information, all our materials are readily available. We've had a chance to go through a few iterations with advisors and early donors, flesh out the FAQ, everything else can be really ready to go by that time. So, I mean, it sounds great on my end.
Okay. Yeah, and I think operations-wise as well, I know we need to do like our own internal agreements, and a lot of this other stuff. Also give Spunit some time on the CAD back end and front end. And maybe we can get this Binance Fellowship, hopefully still, to do that. Although it's not looking too good. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Lorelei, Spunit, do you guys have any feelings on that timing?
Go ahead, Spunit.
Yeah, no, for all I've heard, I think it sounds great. I think it's also more realistic to do it like that, and to have it alongside with that event is, yeah, I think it makes total sense. So no objections for me.
Cool. Yeah, I'm definitely happy to see Griff planning smart about this. Gives me a lot of faith, actually. And I guess I'm curious, like, I don't understand what a lot of like token launches and like project launches in this space have looked like, and like, do people tend to have more success if it's like a 1 month like fiery push, or if it's a long like 3 months, like we're gonna keep building and building the relationships. I don't have a lot of perspective there. I think I'm sure there's some reasons why we originally chose to do the fast timeline that we were trying to go for. So like, if we can just suss those out and see how to preserve that with this new timeline. And then I think I want to, yeah, okay, go ahead. I have another question too, but you can respond.
D, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Well, what I was going to say is I've actually spent a lot of time studying these kinds of dynamics. It's actually like part of the network science research field. And the trick is you're balancing two forces here. One is the fact that you need to, as I was starting to say, like you need to seed the field, like literally sow it. And so you need that enthusiasm, that excitement, that awareness that like sort of sets the stage, but then the actual call to action type stuff tends to need to be fast and hot. Otherwise you get this sort of diffusion in that you just don't get the initiative. So what we're essentially doing is trying to get the best of both worlds here, where the people who are in the earlier, the slow phase are going to feel important, and they're going to feel like a sense of like specialness that comes from being involved in the early phase. And it's not an image, it's not imaginary, it's real. Like you're having these much more personal conversations, and it's growing organically, and that's a much slower process, and it won't necessarily reach as far because it's less broadcasted, but it creates one type of incentive structure that's like based on personal relationships that doesn't necessarily scale or extend as far. And so we get a phase that's focused on that. And then that hot and fast phase is more associated with broadcasting and reaching beyond the scope that you can reach through that slower, organic, more personal. And so we want to be able to access both of those. And so what we're actually describing right now is a strategy that allows us to have a slow phase that attacks that first sort of incentive structure, and then have even like an end date on that transitions into the hot and fast, and then the hard end date. So I would say, Lorelai, I think you're right that we want to preserve that. But what I'm trying to do here is sort of propose a strategy that leverages both of those effects effectively without cannibalizing each other.
For sure. Great. Thank you. Griff, did you still have something to say?
No, I was raising my hand to see.
Oh, thanks.
Is there any? He was literally raising his hand on video.
Okay, but I still have a couple things. So, so then, do we want to have like a very separate, like, hot and fast raise that is from the end of August to the end of September, and like it doesn't open until the end of August?
Narratively, yes. In practice, operationally, it's not necessarily like a different thing.
Okay, so it's sort of just like a media campaign wise. Like,
yeah, it's like we have two parallel campaigns. We have a slow, organic, very relationship oriented campaign, and it's going to get funds from the people who we have relationships with and who are going to want to talk deeply through this stuff and are going to want to give feedback and from whom we want that direct feedback from. And then there's going to be something that is much more constrained. It's more of a broadcast FOMO. Look, like you want to be involved in this? Like, this is your one chance. Hop on.
And are either of those hurt by potential absence from a lot of us during August?
I think that the organic.
I mean, as far as overall common stack, I was just going to say, I think, with Z and myself and the rest of the common stack team present through the Web3 DAppCon tag or common stack. So, I mean, as an organization, we'll be representing pretty well through that month. I mean, obviously with a notable absence of yourself and Griff, which the question is that a game changer? Or can we keep up that? Representing over there.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's a game changer. We will have a lot of people at Burning Man that will be like relevant, but I think you guys can go forward without me. I'll still be sowing the seeds the whole way through, but like, I think it's more important that we realize the timing, how important the timing is. And I do think, to Lorelai's point, that we should not accept so much funding in our multi-sig, or even any funding. I mean, of course, we can't stop someone from sending it, but we should try to like front load those donations for the day of the launch. And we should have people ready and say, please donate on, August 24th. That's what will help us, because then it'll be like, oh my God, look at all these people that came in right away.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So even as we should be getting commitments during the slow phase, not investments. So we should obviously there's no way to guarantee that someone will follow through on a commitment, but I think that it's still, because of what Griff's describing, in our best interest to actually try to secure those as commitments rather than as donations.
Yeah, and then encourage them to hit us that day. The day that we launch, encourage them to have that flow and be like, oh my God, shit's happening. Because that's like when the DAO happens, when any of these ICOs happen that kind of have this split time frame, it's front load and back load every time. And that's what people want to expect. So.
There's actually a really good discussion about the nature of crowdfunding in a book called The Universal Laws. It's got a terrible clickbait name, Universal Laws for Success, but it's written by an accomplished physicist and network scientist who I guess that he just got like conned by his editors into naming his book The Universal Laws of Success. But there's an entire chapter about crowdfunding, almost two, where they talk about the dynamic that you're describing. So it's pretty well substantiated even academically. You can, like, he's written papers about it. So what I would go so far as to say, though, to facilitate this, we should really be careful about when this day is. It needs to be a day, for example, where Griff can actually be fully available, even if it's just for that day. And what we should try to do is build into this some like spectacle-like events around it. So like, you know, maybe like set up a mini command center where like we're streaming, like just do something like fun and like really just like triple down the sort of attention that will generate, because we want to make sure that people want to participate and that it's highly visible and that this like, you know, this flash effect is magnified.
I will be able to have streaming. I don't know how well streamable, but definitely a audio for sure on Playa during that time, and it will work.
To be honest, it'll be almost cool to be able to cut to Griff on the Playa. So like what I'm talking about though is, I mean, what we really need to make it doesn't have to be decided on this meeting, but maybe on the next meeting, we should make a decision on that exact date. But we should be very clear that this is going to be essentially, it's going to be very important that we can like focus operationally on making this into like have high buy-in and high availability of the advisors and the people who are making commitments. 2, that we're going to be able to like do things like, hey, watch this person, he's doing it, and like really make a spectacle of it. And I think that we just, because it's going to require a lot of concentrated effort from a lot of people, that the date selection should actually, you know, maybe it's going to happen like, you know, the day after the TEGG or the day before, like something that we can do to like make sure that a lot of us are, so at least some of us are in the same place, and that we can like that the people are available to do their part for the operational execution. I think kind of like this phased approach gives us a favor, because we allow us to spend that period of time preparing for that event, for that sort of spectacle-y event, and making sure that we do have pre-commitments for people to participate. Maybe even pre-commitments to do it live. Be like, hey, I'm doing it. Like, you know what I mean? Like planning it like that would be, I think, a really good way to get this to be more of a flash event.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, we got to keep pushing. Oh, sorry, go ahead. But
I was just wondering what's the correlation with the KYC timing? Because when does that start?
So technically, we can accept donations before KYC. The KYC is actually being done in advance for the DAO that will launch itself. It's kind of wild, but anyone can donate to us, and we have no obligation. We're not issuing any tokens. We don't need to do KYC. So KYC can be done after the fact. However, we will probably start doing KYC beforehand, I would imagine, with our advisors and with our people.
Our pre-commitments should all have, so it's part of the way that this will work is that our pre-committers should probably have already been KYC'd.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the real thing is anyone can donate. Like, even if we can't, we're not going to put you on the whitelist. Anyone can send money to our multi-sig, and we will use it. But you'll only make it on the whitelist if you've done KYC.
I have to go, you guys. I'm sorry. I have a really hard stop. I really wish I could stay in this conversation right now because I want to talk more about it. So it sounds like it's definitely on the agenda for Friday.
Are there any topics that you needed to push through?
I just had lots of questions about like everything that was just said, but I
have a hard stop too, actually. So if we need to schedule another meeting to continue this discussion, I wouldn't be opposed.
We can continue it on Friday, I think. I'm looking through the agenda. A lot of the last topics are mine, unless Sponnet had anything on the POC front end. And I think that's still waiting on some user story definition. And I've chatted with Abby briefly. Haven't heard back late this week, but I anticipate I'll touch base with her later this week and see how we're doing on that.
Cool. I'm gonna jump. Jeff, if you need me, WhatsApp me and I'll try to find like more time with you.
Cool.
See ya.
See you.
Yeah, a lot of these other advisor meeting, the tag presentations. Oh, I guess that's. Do you have a few more minutes, Sponnet? Maybe we can just take another 5 minutes and finish out this agenda.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
And are there any points that you especially want to talk about, Swanet?
Not specifically, no.
Okay. Okay, Jeff.
I guess most of the second half of the agenda, yeah, Binance Fellowship. I mean, that hopefully we can pull out some funding from that, which would go towards the POC. And I guess tech is on the road at the moment. Is that what's happening?
He just got back, so we'll see.
Okay, perfect. Cool. Anything else on that Binance Fellowship? Oh, nice.
No, not really. I mean, I think we just gotta like do the user story.
Keep poking.
I don't know, Spana, if you
Yeah.
want to give us more like understanding of exactly what like, are you expecting user stories in GitHub or what format?
Yeah, I mean, it can take any form. It's just that we need to sort of be aligned on what needs to be built or what's useful to build right now already, and what is not, and also that sort of it should align with the narrative on the one hand, but also have the maximum impact on convincing people. So that's sort of the thing that's still not clear in my head, and that's what we need to translate, I think, to the Binance people, to make sure so that they clearly have something like, okay, we want to build this and this and this. Do you want to throw some funding at it? Isn't that sort of the goal?
Well, yeah. Well, Binance people, I think, would be funding us to build it. So you're saying the user story? Well, wait. When you say convincing people, what exactly do you mean?
Yeah, so for the things that I want to hear basically from Jeff, from Abby, is that how do you want to tell this story about the common stack, and how do you want to convince people that this is like a useful project for them and whatnot? And so we want to show them something they can play with, right? And so the definition of how broad that thing, like we want to be able to play with it, is that's still not clear for me, and that makes it difficult for me to create user stories that are really actionable for a developer. So I think you have user stories on the side of what's a storyline, and then that storyline needs to be translated into something that the coder can actually execute. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So we're looking for almost like a use case.
Yeah, it's sort of
something that can be.
Yeah, it's more like, I would more call it a user journey, to say like, if I would be someone who comes to that application, let's call it that, what would I expect it to do?
Right.
So first I want to do this, and then that comes out, and then I'm like inspired, and then do the next thing, and then that comes out, and to make sure that these different steps, and it can be 2, 3, 4 different steps, that they all together form that narrative that you want to bring, that they don't necessarily explain something else.
I would say that if the three of us could sit down for an hour, we could bust this out. Like, and just do a call, and like just
collaborate on a doc.
Yeah, exactly. Collab on a doc, and mostly talk it out, but then review at least for me, like if we talked it out and then reviewed the video and took notes on what we said during and with review, I think in 1 hour we could walk through the entire user journey and the various user journeys, because there's like there's just a bunch of screens, and it's like the buyer, all they want to do is buy tokens, so they buy tokens. And then there's the other one, all they want to do is vote, and so they vote. And then there's the other one, all they want to do, and we just walk them through that.
Yeah, I'm totally in for that. I think it can only help, and if it only costs us like 1 hour of our time to get something, uh, at least get a first rough draft of it or a first iteration on that. I think that's something also much more tangible for the Binance guys, for example. I mean, right now it's still super vague everything, so I would be totally in for that.
How about
Uh,
after the Common Stack call on Friday?
Let's see, because I'll be on the road then, but I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see where I'll be. So
What- what-
Friday.
what's your strategy like? Or what's your schedule like for the other days too?
Yeah, the thing is, I'm going to a wedding in Italy. So on Friday, Friday evening and Saturday. No, it's
What if
really
we?
not gonna work.
What a
How about Thursday?
Thursday's tough for me. It's the 4th of July.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
no, wait. But Thursday morning is fine. That's right. Yeah, I can do Thursday.
Thursday morning.
No,
Thursday
that won't work for me because I'll be flying Thursday morning, and my flight's at 7:20 in the morning.
And what? Well, we're 9 hours ahead of you, so it'd be your Thursday evening. But still, if I'm also cool with tomorrow.
Yeah,
Tomorrow, as long as it's later in the day. I'm just coming back from a cottage tomorrow afternoon, so I'll be driving.
Mm-hmm. Actually, Wednesdays tomorrow would be the best time for me this week still.
Are
And
you able to do late at night?
or I
Uh,
could put an hour aside from here. If daytime, well, I guess we've got our comms call at noon.
Yeah, but we
Noon,
can skip that if we
sorry,
have.
Eastern time.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do and sometime around there, and then I can just drive home in the afternoon after that.
The only moment I have that is something as important as this is at 7 p.m. Europe time.
Yeah, that would work for me.
So that's
That's the
PM
only
here.
time I can't do it. It's the only time I can't. So any other time,
The only time you can or cannot.
cannot. The only
Okay.
time I cannot do it is at 7 p.m.
Sorry.
So what if we did 11 a.m., 5 p.m. Europe time? Does that give you enough? How's your time around that,
Yeah.
Sponnet? That gives you a couple hours.
So 5 p.m. on Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would work for me.
So that's 11 a.m. Eastern time. We'll say until 12. We'll time box it in an hour. I'm adding Griff and Sponnet, and you guys should see. What's your email again, Sponnet?
It's Stefan. I'll paste it here in the chat. Wait.
It's just not popping up.
Stefan.
Cool. So that will be okay. Cool. Is that all we have about that? So tomorrow, 11 a.m. is 5 p.m. CET. Perfect. Okay. Back to. Yeah, and I think that's a good way to do it because we have a lot of these ideas semi-fleshed out, and if we can just kind of get them tightened up in a doc as we're talking through them, that would be, I think, get us really on the road to having these docs and storyline to match.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right, that sounds good. So I will send out the meeting invite in a few minutes once we're off the call. Advisor meeting in August, I have not worked on yet. I'm probably going to reach out to one of the organizers in Berlin and see if they can just recommend bar restaurant type thing that would work for 25 people or 20 people or however many we're expecting. But no action on that this week. The TEG presentations, I got a request from Angela, who is running the Engineering Global Gathering. If I'm going to have anyone on stage accompany me, she'd like to know over the course of July. So we chatted about you joining me for the CAD walkthrough. We haven't really delved into details of even what component we would want to present or anything like that. But if you're playing around with the POC, I would definitely appreciate the expertise that you would have around answering any code-related questions. I'm not sure if that's a sure thing in your mind, or if you had any hesitations about that still.
No, that's fine. No, great.
Cool. Okay, great. So I'll tell her that you'll join me on stage for that. And hopefully over the next couple of weeks, as we're working on these user stories and the POC, we'll really get a chance to walk through some of that code together in a couple of calls and be a little more familiar about what kinds of questions could be asked, and we can kind of put together the framework of a walkthrough for one of those components as whichever one is most relevant.
Hey Jeff, I'm being beckoned. Is it possible? Do you have anything else for me? I mean, I know we didn't do action steps, but I just kind of need to run.
No, I think that's all good. The only thing left is the POC demo, which we're already chatting about. And actually, I think that's good, unless you had any other questions too, Sponit.
No, let's chat on the user stories tomorrow, and then for me that's fine.
Okay, awesome. Hey, thanks guys. I'm gonna end the live stream.
Okay,
for sure.